At the New Jersey SBDC Network, our mission is simple: to help businesses grow and succeed. Our consulting, training, and information services make it easier for businesses to reach their potential. Whether you're currently in operation or just starting out, we have the right tools, resources, and expertise to help you succeed. Visit us online to get started on your path to success today.
A pleasant good afternoon to everyone. My name is Takoa Bell. I am an event coordinator for the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark. And on behalf of Dr. Tendai Ndoro, the Regional Director, I would like to welcome you to our e-commerce, Developing Your E-commerce Capabilities webinar. For those of you here that are unfamiliar with the SBDC, it stands for Small Business Development Centers. And here at the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark, we serve as the premier provider of business training and technical assistance services to establish small businesses, startups, as well as to entrepreneurs. We are one of 12 centers in the NJSBDC network, and we service those in Essex County. Our center is hosted by the Rutgers Business School and is funded through a partnership agreement between the Small Business Administration, Rutgers University, and the New Jersey Business Action Center. Now, our mission here is to help entrepreneurs as well as business owners start and grow sustainable, successful businesses through the delivery of one-on-one business consulting, training, and technical assistance programs. Now, these services are provided to you at no cost and are paid for by your tax dollars. If you or your business is located in Essex County, our website is www.rnsbdc.com, where you can request counseling on the top right-hand corner of our site. And clicking on the Request Counseling button will lead you to fill out some information, including the help you are seeking. And within 24 to 48 business hours, a consultant will reach out to you for an assessment. For those of you that are not in Essex County, our other website is www.njsbdc.com. And on this website, you can type in your county and it will refer you to your local SBDC office. For the benefit of everyone attending today's webinar, the audio has been muted and we will be taking questions via the Q&A feature here on Zoom. We do have the chat feature on, but the Q&A feature will help us to remain organized and have all the questions and answers in one designated area. So please feel free to post your questions there and we will do our best to respond during or at the end of the webinar. I also want to let you know that a copy of the presentation slides along with a video recording of this webinar will be emailed to you within 48 to 72 business hours. So you can refer to the information as well as the slides long after the webinar has ended, okay? It is now my pleasure to introduce to you our presenter for today's presentation, Ahmed Akdag. Ahmed is the CEO and owner of Styremont and is an SBDC consultant here at the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark in the areas of e-commerce, online strategic planning, and supply chain sourcing. Now, without further ado, I will turn today's presentation over to Ahmed.
Thank you, Takoa. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the presentation now. So this presentation is going to be about e-commerce capabilities, just to give an idea of what you should take into consideration, get an idea of what are common tools that people use and people might need to do e-commerce, to help automate the process, to make things more efficient in regards to the logistics, the supply chain technology, and any different venues that they can take an approach to grow their business once they have set up. This is a supplement to previous webinar about e-commerce, getting the idea of the e-commerce ecosystem. But even if this is the first webinar you're watching, this one will help you understand if you are planning to get into e-commerce, or even if you are currently doing e-commerce. It'll give you an idea of what tools are out there, what you need to know to start planning, and how you can grow your business once you've started doing e-commerce, because many of these tools have now become standard, commonplace. In fact, some of them do end up becoming requirements as you grow your business and work with more online retailers. So just to break down the three parts of the webinar, the technology component will pretty much just cover software topics within the e-commerce context. This means the softwares that are available out there to enable and improve your e-commerce business operations. Um, I'll go over the different types of those technologies, but these are things that elevate your business operations beyond perhaps using, very manual processes, or maybe relying on Excel for many things. Some of these have become cost effective. The prices are not that are within good range. They usually have basic plans that, because of the increase in number of people doing e-commerce, they have enabled more access to people, so you're not going to have to worry too much about there being high costs and having to decide whether it's worth it or not. It depends on software, but generally speaking, they have become a bit more accessible, so that's generally good news. For logistics, however, logistics will pretty much just cover certain aspects of logistic capabilities, things you should keep in mind, and as well as some ideas. The reason that is because logistics is a huge part of the e-commerce, in context of it being a problem. Shipping costs tend to be a major headache for many e-commerce businesses, and they continue to be as rates increase year over year. Um, so there's different options you can take, and I'll go over them, but essentially this part will just kind of cover, give you an idea of what you should think of, and perhaps give you some ideas of different alternatives you can take, simply because this is the most challenging aspect of growing your e-commerce business, or even making it profitable if you're starting off. People have faced challenges where they started e-commerce, they had a good product that sells, but the shipping costs pretty much cut out any profit margins they had, and they have to put in shipping charges, and that obviously slows things down a bit, and affects the overall sales. So it's a balancing act, so it's helpful to understand what options, what to think of, and how to approach these issues. And the matter of supply chain is two-pronged. First one kind of just covers aspects of the supply chain for what you should think of when you're doing product research. I won't go into too much detail on the product research because that's a whole other topic that you can get into quite in depth, but I'll cover some of the basics that you should know about in regards to how e-commerce platforms, if you're selling to third party to like Amazon, or if you're planning to become a supplier to an online retailer, say like Home Depot or any of the other sites that require you to become a supplier to sell on their online marketplace. I'm going to go over what they consider important for the products that you offer them and you bring into their site, and what they consider important for the products that are currently on their site. And the second part is just giving you an understanding of how you should approach that when you're working in e-commerce, how you should approach your supply chain, your products, just so you have an idea when you're doing your planning, that you understand what you should have considered ahead of time, just so it doesn't become an issue when it pops up later and you haven't had any plans in place to deal with that situation. Whether it's an opportunity or an issue that comes up, you always want to make sure that you have that information on hand, just so you are able to take advantage or avoid the consequences, depending on whichever it is. So when it comes to software, the breakdown here that I'll be going over is so for shipping, shipping is important. Most people will eventually want to start using a shipping software service, simply because You only have two other options other than using the software. One is you use the browser, you log into the FedEx website or the UPS website, and you fill out order, the shipment information. So you're buying a label and you're putting in the information. Very manual process. It's you got to go on the website and do it from there. Second one is you can go to any shipping service provider. There'll be businesses in your community in the local area who offer shipping services. You get to use their rates to ship, but you usually have to go to that location and bring the items that you're going to be shipping. That's the second one. Shipping software simplifies that process a bit. FedEx and UPS do have shipping services software. How it works is essentially similar to what's done on the website, but the software itself is set up with the understanding that you are going to be making labels. So it has a bit more features in there. So you're not going, you're not opening multiple tabs if you have multiple orders, or trying to go one order at a time. The FedEx Ship Manager and the UPS World Ship will have a bit more additional features in there. They might even have integration capabilities depending on the marketplace or the software you use, or the retailer, or the e-commerce software you use, whether it's Shopify or WooCommerce. They'll generally have some kind of integration component, and this FedEx Ship Manager and UPS World Ship will be some things that you can integrate, where it essentially simplifies the entire process, because whenever you get an order, you can just have that order sent to the shipping manager, and then it'll show up there with the information you need, and then you just do the final touches to get the label and then print the label. Now, those are the company's own systems. They do have the downside of requiring a bit more additional steps to set up, and the interface, well, they are continuing to improve on it. The interfaces are still a bit I should say a bit archaic, I would say. They're a bit old. They still have that 90s motif to it, with like 90s software. Like I said, they are making upgrades. They make improvements on the back end. It works fine. It's just that when it comes to the user interface and your experience using it, it can be a little bit of a confusing thing that you just have to get used to. If that's not something that you really want to deal with, there are other options. I put ShipStation here as an example just because they're the most prominent one that comes up, but they aren't the only one. So software like ShipStation are essentially third-party shipping service providers. They're similar to the ones that I mentioned, where you have the shipping service businesses in your community, but this one is they're fully online, and what they do is that they let you use their rates, which might be better pricing than what rates you might get because you don't have the volume. They let you use their rates to create labels, and they offer simpler integration capabilities. So software like ShipStation, for example, will have the ability to integrate to your Amazon, to your Walmart, to your own websites, whether it's Shopify or WooCommerce or any of those other services. So it kind of simplifies the process, but it is a software as a service. So you are paying a monthly subscription fee, and they have different plans that affect how many how many shipments you can do through in a month. And if you go past that amount, then you upgrade to the next plan and so on. But what they offer is essentially a software that lets you use any shipping service. Whereas FedEx and UPS obviously is FedEx and UPS. ShipStation lets you use whatever option you want to use. It'll give you like a drop down menu when you're making the labels. It'll let you pick which FedEx service, whether the ground or the air. Same with UPS. It'll have USPS. Just to note, Stamps and ShipStation are technically owned by the same company. The only difference is Stamps is their page and their brand for USPS. It was originally USPS. Now it also has UPS, but ShipStation has USPS, UPS, FedEx, and everything else. So if you're primarily planning on using USPS and maybe you'll have a parcel going out with UPS. You can sign up for stamps, or you can just sign up for ShipStation. Either way, it just kind of comes down to which carrier you prefer to use, but they're both owned by the same company. So if you set up with ShipStation, you will have access to the USPS provided by stamps. So that's just clarification. But essentially, software like this lets you go on your browser, lets you integrate your marketplaces, lets you get the labels you need. It'll let you give you an option whether if you have a thermal printer, you can set it to print thermal printer labels. Um, and if you don't, if you just have regular printer, you can print the regular labels. So this software helps a lot, especially if you start getting increase in orders, simply because it lets you manage the orders, the shipping of the orders. It helps you get the labels you need. They usually give a decent rate if you're using their rates in the case of ShipStation, and it also helps send notifications to customers if you don't have that set up with if you're using your own website and you don't really have that set up. Services like ShipStation will send that notification instead. So overall, very helpful if you don't have anything on hand that is set up with software like that. And like I said, for the shipping especially, these things are very accessible now. So it's just something to consider if you are getting into e-commerce, or you currently have e-commerce and you're doing things a bit manually. It's worth checking out and seeing if the software can really help your business operations and make it more efficient. Now, the next thing is something that doesn't immediately become a consideration early on, but it tends to become an issue later on, is inventory and product management. The reason that is that most people, when they're doing e-commerce, your focus is obviously selling. So you're focused on getting the products listed, and then you know eliminating, like, reducing your expenses with shipping, looking into marketing, trying to get more traffic, trying to get more sales. Your focus is on that. But what's important to always have on hand is your product information, and all the product details for that. So it's not just a case of you open the product somewhere and then it's the information is there, and then maybe later on you can copy paste. That usually works for a couple of products, but if your catalog starts to grow and you start to sell on multiple marketplaces and multiple online retailers, you run into a certain issue where you're spending a lot of time preparing templates with information you technically already have, but you don't have it somewhere that's easily accessible and easily copyable. Um, so when you have that, that kind of creates a bottleneck. And the second issue is sometimes you run into issues where the content might need to be updated, the content might have some errors in it. And if you're on multiple marketplaces, you have to manage each of them individually. um, if you don't have that reference, and let's say you do have you've grown your business enough that you have employees now, or even just one person who might be responsible for maintaining your online marketplaces. So their job is basically data entry and data verification, where they go around, they make sure all the data is correct. um, for that person to be able to do their job effectively, they need a reference sheet. And if they don't have something that's clear and they're going off of what the other marketplace might have, and it is something they can do, they can go look at the marketplace that has the correct data, look at the details, and then fix it on the other marketplaces. But that takes time, and that creates the potential for error because there's a lot of back and forth. So what is valuable to have, especially if you're just starting, I highly recommend it. Even if you have to do it on Excel, like, these are software that simplify the process, especially if you have multiple items in your catalog. But that doesn't mean you need to start with these. If you're just getting started, or if you have very few items right now and you are planning to increase the number of items you have, even a basic Google Sheets or Excel file, um, if you put all your product information in a master list that has product title, product type, size, color, every detail that could possibly be asked. My recommendation, if you're selling on Seller Central, for example, um, you can download their template and then use their template to figure out the headers of the data you want to use. It'll be the easiest way to do it, but essentially you want to have as much information about that product recorded and on a master list, and then keep that master list on hand and always add to it as more products come in. So you'll have all the descriptions, the bullet points, the keywords, everything that could possibly apply to that product. You have that information there, just so eventually later on, when you run into issues where you have to continually manage your item listings, figure out how you want to make updates, hire employees and you need them to understand the products better, um, that master list will come in handy. Now, these softwares that I put in here, what they tend to offer is essentially they're not just like a database, because why you don't need to pay for something to make just like a basic database. Like if you're just going to use them to hold your product information, you could just use Google Sheets or an Excel file and make it cost effective. But the reason that I bring these software up is that a lot of these software also have integration capabilities, both in terms of creating and maintaining content, as well as importantly inventory management. And this goes into a multi-channel integration. um, so what happens is that if you don't have any multi-channel software, and let's say you're selling the product, you need to maintain the inventory. You're going to be hopping from each site to site to update the inventory. What these softwares provide is that not only are you able to put in your product information and you put it as create a master list on their software, they will have utilities in place through, it's usually API integration, but they'll have channel partners. So they'll be partnered with perhaps Amazon or Walmart or Home Depot, where you can put in your product information in their master list, and then all the channels you sell on and all the channels they're partnered with, if you sell on those partners, they'll be able to syndicate that information. So they'll be able to send that info to those marketplaces, and you'll essentially have one centralized location to create new products and manage new products. So you'll be able to make edits there too. So essentially, let's say you edit the master list, you put in a couple of new products, you update a couple of existing descriptions, and then you'll be able to use that software to send out those updates on those item creations to the channel partners that they have that you sell on. So I'll give an example using the three I mentioned. Let's say you sell on Amazon, Home Depot, and Walmart. Instead of creating three separate templates, three going into each site separately and updating information, you would be going to your one central master list hosted on these services, and then you would syndicate that information from there. And then on the back end, there would be the API integration where that data would be sent out from, and make the updates and make the creations. Um, and you can even do this with inventory. So you can update the inventory and then have that inventory data syndicated out to those marketplaces. So instead of going to each one individually and updating the inventory, you're managing the inventory from that one centralized location and then sending it out to those other platforms you sell on. Now, there's a lot of different services out there, and it's increased as e-commerce has grown. So while I threw some of these companies out here, these are not the end all of software. And in fact, some people even have custom software built, because everything is tied to API, and I'll touch on that in the next few slides. But since it's tied to API, technically you can have any software developer, anyone with experience with software, can technically make a inventory and product management software that's very basic, but has that API integration to send the data. So it's the reason that there's so many companies is because it's actually relatively simple, but paying a subscription for the monthly use will tend to come out cheaper than hiring a software developer to build something custom. So that's why most people don't really go with the custom option unless they have other ideas or if they're able to get a pretty good deal. Um, Now, third one is not necessarily tied to just e-commerce, but it is important to have, especially for your entire business. But accounting is vital. one is obvious one, bookkeeping. You do want to, keep track of your business operations and, have everything on the books, just so you have a good idea of your financial health. But the second reason I bring it up is when you're selling on e-commerce, um, errors can happen, and these e-commerce platforms, especially Amazon, are very tied to being able to provide data. So if you're having a hard time giving them the data to verify that an error happened so they can fix it, it'll take a bit longer for them to resolve your problem than if you had that data on hand. That doesn't mean that they won't resolve the issue, because I mean, and then the end of the day, if they owe you money and they're not paying it because of an issue, they do have to figure it out and make sure that they're not keeping your money. But if you don't have the information you need on hand, it could take longer, and they're if you're not able to give them the data, they're going to work at their own pace, and their own pace is a lot slower than what you would ideally want. So you want to be able to keep track of all that data, because you need that information, that bookkeeping, those invoices, um, and that's important to have. And another thing is that the sales and expenses, the reason you want to have that too is that, let's say you're selling on, as a supplier to online retailers. So let's say you're working with like Wayfair, or Walmart DSV, or Home Depot, or Macy's, anybody like that, any company, Kroger's, for example, Target. Let's say you're working with them. Um, you want to be, when you'll usually have some kind of account manager or buyer that you speak with. You'll have their contact information, or at least their email address, so you can speak to them about growing your business with them. Uh, they'll have their data, but you'll want to have your data when you're doing business with them, because sometimes they do have issues where maybe their data is not necessarily accurate, and um, they might have the wrong idea about your company's growth, whereas your data shows there is actually growth. So if you have that on hand, you can make a very strong point that you are growing and things are going well. Or on the other hand, if things are not growing to your expectations, you can use this data and then contact that buyer or the account manager and then say, hey, our business traction, percent sales or growth, month over month, or year over year, versus, and then we want to find out what's going on. Can you look into this? If you have that data on hand to concretely say what percentage you're seeing, or what kind of what the situation looks like, that will generally help push them to give you more data or give you ideas to help grow your business. So the accounting aspect is technically under what I would call a data umbrella. And accounting is at the top because that's the lifeline of your business. So that's why I said it's not really e-commerce, but it does value into e-commerce as well. And I just want to emphasize that it's important to be keeping track of this information, because you need it. So there are services out there. They have QuickBooks, has different plans. Zero is another one. There's a lot out there. Yes, you could use an Excel, but I generally recommend some kind of software, just so you have additional features that kind of help you better keep track and get reporting and see trends overall. So I strongly recommend having some kind of software like that as well. Now, API, this webinar isn't going to get very technical. So if you know about API, this is kind of just be like a very, very high level summary. If you don't know about API, this is just going to let you understand what role API has in e-commerce, as well as overall like internet software, things like that. So API is basically called Application Programming Interface. And what it does is it allows developers, it gives developers a standard defined utilities, which is basically like a library of standard, standard utilities, standard connections, standard information with whatever platform it is. to allow them to create a program that connects to it. So it's essentially like if you were building a bridge somewhere, the API would essentially be they give you the blueprint for how to build a bridge to whichever section that would be ideal for that bridge to be built towards. So you're not, building your bridge into a cliff, or you're not building a bridge that's questionable in integrity. Uh, this essentially gives the lights up the runway for the developers to make the landing. It's not just e-commerce. A lot of technology out there is uses API, and it's because of its prominence and how it works to simplify a developer's job. There's a lot of software for almost every kind of potential activity you could manually be doing. So there's programs for shipping, invoicing, inventory management, product management, customer service. It's all out there. The ones I mentioned before are the priorities, so the inventory and product management and shipping. But that doesn't mean you're limited to those. There are a lot of other software out there for e-commerce and for your business in general that could use API to help out your business operations if you're working with a retailer or a marketplace or anything like that, or even just using a different software and you want to connect one software to that other software. API will help that happen as well. So it's something that has because of its prominence allowed so many software out there, which gives you a lot of options. So whenever you see any mention of API, or even if you're working with a retailer and you want to find out if you can integrate your software with them, you can ask them, do they have API integration? And if they say yes, then that means whatever software you're using, there is a chance that you'll be able to integrate it with their software or their program, and then transmit that data back and forth rather than doing it manually. So it's a good thing to know and be able to ask about from a marketplace for integration purposes. Now we get into something a bit more complex. So this one is even more summarized. But essentially, EDI is something you may or may not have heard of. It doesn't pop up as often as API, and it's mostly tied to the fact that EDI is a bit more complex, a bit more for if your business has reached a certain level or is working with certain partners. Because EDI is essentially a very extreme it's not technically accurate, but it's one level above API in terms of technical complexity, because EDI is electronic data interchange, and what it does is that it essentially helps automate a lot of business operations. So its original function was basically a transmitting business data documents electronically, and here's a little graph showing how that works. But it's not necessarily documents anymore. It's actually documents, and then these documents will have instructions or data, and that has essentially advanced EDI to become something similar to API, where you are able to transmit data and instructions, and this way you can send inventory, you can receive sales reports, you can update product information, you can receive product information. It has upgraded into that level. The only problem is that it's kind of an old system, decades old, um, and it's still rather complex to set up. So it tends to cost more to set EDI up because there's a lot of expense in mapping out the document data with your business and your business and the software you're using with the trade partner. There's setup fees, there's data transmission fees depending on the type of EDI. But the reason that I wanted to bring up EDI is that because EDI is still at the core of most of the automation processes. So any business, especially in e-commerce, that's looking to kind of fully automate, their operations, operate, receive, confirming orders, operate inventory updates, automate shipping label preparation, automate invoicing, all that. And by automate, I mean fully automatic. as in the system does everything, and you just have one person managing it and supervising and just making sure nothing breaks. Um, the computer is doing the business essentially. You're managing it, you're supervising it, but the computer is doing everything from confirming the orders to updating the inventory to preparing the labels to sending out the invoices. And EDI is at the core of that because it handles that volume. Technically, you could have API doing that as well, but generally EDI is just one tier above that. And a lot of the online retailers, for example, because a lot of larger businesses still use EDI because it's expensive for them to try to shift into something else, which is the whole reason EDI still um, remains relevant despite it being a bit old. Is that a lot of the larger businesses have their systems set up with EDI, so they don't want to change that because it's very expensive. So instead of that, retailers will have EDI capability, and then these large partners will be able to connect and automate their business with that retailer, and that's why it exists with them. And where it might come into your focus is if you are this will mostly apply if you become a supplier. If you start growing business as a supplier to online retailers, there will come a time where EDI will probably become a requirement, or in some cases some retailers will specifically say, if you want to be our supplier, you need EDI. So you won't even be able to start working with them unless you have EDI. Now, there is a positive in that you don't necessarily need to. They have made some improvements to to how they service EDI. So, in the past, you needed to have a server, you needed to have a programmer set it up, you needed someone to sit down make connections. Now there are actually browser-based EDIs where you set up with a subscription plan with that EDI service provider, the data service provider, and then they'll still charge a fee for mapping, but you'll be mapping to partners. So it'll be similar to how EDI works, where I mentioned that the partner, anyone they're partnered with, they'll be able to integrate with them and syndicate the data. So you can do the same thing with EDI. It'll still cost more than API, especially the setup, because some setup fees are just straight default fixed fees charged by required by the online retailer for each connection. Um, so that is a requirement you won't be able to get around, but it is more cost effective than if you had to get everything done from scratch. So if you do decide to become a supplier and you run into a business that says, if you want to work with us, you need to have EDI, you don't need to be too worried in that you do have options to have a browser-based EDI. You would still want to just check in with them and make sure that they don't have any specific expectations of EDI. Technically, the browser EDI works similar to basically the same way as the one set up for you does, but it's always safe to just make sure that there isn't any confusion there. But overall, browser-based EDI works. I haven't put any specific examples simply because it depends a lot on who you're selling, who you're doing business with, and the product you're selling. Some EDI providers understand certain industries better than other industries, and they do have to individually do mapping. So the I didn't want to put any businesses because um, the pricing for you, even for the browser-based one, essentially depends on what you negotiate and the circumstances of your business. So it's very variable in what it might cost you. So I can't necessarily give a fixed fee, nor can I, give a specific company, simply because it's so dynamic and it depends so much on the type of business you're doing, who you're doing it with, and how many products, what type of products. Um, it just basically depends on every person reaching out and finding out about it. But I do just want to let you know that browser based EDI does exist, and it is a bit more cost effective than setting it up from scratch, but it will be more expensive than API. So keep it in mind. If you don't have a supplier who wants EDI, you don't have to worry about it until your business traction grows and you're getting a lot of sales, and it becomes harder to manage the business in part, like with people. If you're having a hard time, the manpower is having difficulty in keeping track of all the sales going on, you'll then want to consider looking into EDI as an option and finding out if there's partners you work with. Now, if you're selling on your own website, EDI doesn't matter. You're not because you're selling on your own website. You don't need to transmit that information to anybody per se. API will still have a role in your website because you might need to integrate a shipping software service to your website to offer that option, but you won't need EDI because that's you are your business. You don't have a trading partner doing parts of your business for you, so that's not a concern. So if you're doing your own website, EDI isn't really a concern. You're going to be concerned with API. But if you're working with a trade partner with an online like Amazon or Home Depot or Macy's or whoever you're working with, EDI might be a topic that will come up as you continue doing business with them. Now, this is kind of expanding into overall business, and I just want to bring it up just so you know that it exists, what it does, and when you should maybe start considering it. ERP is Enterprise Resource Planning. This essentially means any software that has integrated every business activity into a single centralized system, and it allows you to manage your business activities from that one system. So instead of having a situation where you have QuickBooks for accounting and you're going into QuickBooks to check your accounting, but then you want to check the shipping stuff, and then you got to go open the shipping manager. What ERP does is that it collects all the data from all the softwares you're using. And there might be some software out there where the ERP offers it. That's not as common because the people making the ERP software in that case would have to, if you see these slices of the pie here, if someone was making ERP with all of this built in, it would essentially mean that there's developers need to build every slice would need to have its own software built. So that's not very common. Developers and the companies rarely put in that kind of effort. So usually what they will do is that they'll focus on having built-in some of these pies, and then the rest of it will be integration basis. So for accounting, they might have QuickBooks integration, and then for supply chain, they might have, let's say, like for shipping, they might have ShipStation built in, and then for inventory management, they might have, one of those companies I mentioned there, like Stybo, for example. They might have integration with that. So essentially, the ERP integrates all the software you're using, so you have one software, and then you can use that one software to see all the information and see how it interconnects. This isn't something that might be an immediate concern. This is only comes up if your business starts to grow and you're having you want to put everything in a centralized place to keep track of it, and see which direction your business is going. The reason I did bring it up though is because ERPs nowadays have become a bit more accessible. So in the past, they used to be a bit more expensive and something that companies with a lot of business activity would normally want to look into. But nowadays, because of the software as a service where you pay a subscription fee and a lot more people getting used to making those API connections, you can generally find ERPs that are more cost effective and more accessible and simpler to set up. It's something I want to just bring up so you can keep in mind. If you're just a solo person or maybe a family e-commerce business, this isn't really going to be something you're going to be considering. But let's say you've reached a point, you have a warehouse, maybe you have one or two employees, you have someone handling the books, bookkeeping, someone managing shipping, your sales are increasing. You can take a look and see if there's any ERP available that might be something worth setting up. I didn't put any recommendations or pricing for this one either because ERP is still a negotiated price situation. They don't really have like a fixed fee. That what they'll do is that they'll tell you that there's a certain monthly fee, but you can negotiate that down. So it's based off of your communication with the service provider and you shopping around and seeing what options you have out there that can give you the best prices and best features. But it's good to know because this will help centralize all your activities and essentially give you one dashboard that will let you see the entire picture. So instead of you checking with your the person handling accounting and then going and checking person handling your warehouse and then taking the notes and then seeing how it matches and interacts. You'll have one software that has all that information, so it'll help you with strategic planning and business management. And I bring it up for e-commerce because it's important for e-commerce for you to be keeping track of your business operations, because e-commerce is very competitive. Everybody, well, when you're doing traditional business, you're maybe competing with the people in the area that you're working in. With e-commerce, you're competing with everybody, because the marketplace is pretty much international, and everybody, the ease of entering it is very low. So the threshold's very low, so it's very easy to start doing e-commerce. So when you're in a situation where you're bashing heads with millions of different people, um, you need to be able to have that advantage, being responsive, being quick, and making sure your strategic planning is, almost perfect, so you can make sure any opportunity that comes your way, you leverage it, and any obstacle that comes your way, you can avoid it ahead of time. So I want to bring this up as a matter of strategic planning, and as a technology that exists to help you achieve that. So now we're going to cap it off with multi-channel, just to give you an idea, because I did mention it before, but I want to define it here. So anyone who's not familiar, multi-channel platform is essentially any service that works with multiple marketplace partners. So you have one centralized service, and they have connections to multiple platforms. And the reason I want to bring this up is because nowadays a lot of software service providers have multi-channel capabilities. Some call it omni-channel, some call it multi-channel, but there isn't really as major difference as it's stated. But essentially, for multi-channel, um, yeah, that central marketplace, it'll connect to most of the places you're selling on, hopefully depending on software provider, but most of the prominent ones that you hear of, for example, Shopify, or ShipStation, or it's not tied to a specific type of software. It can be any kind of software, but it will help connect to those, and you'll have that one central place to transmit data everywhere. So if you see anything about multi-channel, just know that that's what it means. It means that it's connected to multiple channels from one centralized marketplace, one centralized software. And I kind of would recommend trying to find and make sure that whatever software you're using has some kind of multi-channel aspect to it, just because it's more efficient that way. There's really no reason nowadays to use a software that currently only connects to one channel. That's just not very effective. You want to just check and make sure that they are multi-channel. Um, and also make sure that the multi-channel partners they have are relevant to you. Like, so if you have Amazon and they have Amazon and they say they're multi-channel, but then the platforms they're multi-channel with aren't anything you are with except for Amazon, then they're not really multi-channel for you. They are multi-channel, but it doesn't help you in any way, because if you're not going to use any of those other partners, or if you're not currently using them, then you're not getting any benefit from that. So you want to make sure that it's multi-channel, and it's multi-channel for you, and it's connected to partners you currently use or you plan on using, just so when you are paying for that, you're getting the full benefit, rather than being stuck in a situation where um, you're just getting like partial, or a fraction of what you could be benefiting from. Now for logistics, we're gonna go over a couple of just the basics of logistics here. So for shipping, there's essentially, and many of you are probably familiar with these terms, but there's three terms that define the types of not parcels, but shipping. So parcel basically is small packages, individual cartons, small shipments, small items, nothing nothing large, nothing heavy, anything this is what you would regularly think of when you think of a package being shipped. You would think parcel. There's a lot of carriers, obviously, all the prominent ones: FedEx, USPS, UPS, DHL. Um, these are parcel carriers. Most e-commerce is technically parcel. you don't really have you don't have too much LTL or TL. Um, so parcel is the core, and if you're not selling anything large or heavy or in giant bulks, your experience is gonna be with parcel. Now, less than truckload is usually palletized. There are instances where it might not be palletized, but in most scenarios, it's palletized. Um, it refers to very large products. Large appliances would likely have to be LTL, depending on the size too. Um, Furniture, some furniture is like there are some sellers that sell sofas, for example. They ship them in parts, but the parts are they have to take the sofa apart and then package in the boxes and then put the boxes on a pallet because it's big. That's LTL. For LTL, technically, the large carriers like FedEx, UPS will have LTL capabilities, but there are also trucking companies. So when you start hitting LTL and TL, you're gonna also hear about trucking companies. There's various ways of getting quotes, getting pricing, but LTL, that's what it refers to, and it's less than truckload because your shipment isn't filling an entire trailer, the large truck trailer. It's not filling it out; it's just taking up a small portion of it. And then truckload is if you are filling the entire trailer. This situation is a bulk order. This is something that will only happen if you are a supplier and you are selling to the online retailer and they are ordering in huge quantities. Um, you're For LTL, it is possible to have customers getting it in LTL. Usually, like I said, if you're selling appliances or large furniture, it'll be LTL because it won't go parcel. So you can have a business to consumer situation there, but for truckload, that's not very likely. I mean, I haven't heard of any customer ordering a truckload of product. But essentially, this is going to be something where you are working with an retailer and they are ordering in bulk, likely to their warehouse. Um, so if you ever have the opportunity to sell on Vendor Central, if you do Walmart DSV, um, if you're working with any of those retailers who become required to be a supplier and they do the warehousing, um, there is the potential for truckload, but again, I should mention that even for them, truckload isn't super common. Rarely do retailers buy that much quantity for their stores or their warehouses unless they are fully certain your product is something that's going to sell. So if your product is something that they're 100% certain will sell if they put it in their stores, then you'll start getting TL orders. But if not, they'll probably do LTL where you'll send them a couple of pallets, and then they'll sell that quantity. So even with online retailers, truckload isn't very common, but it's good to know that these are the three things, and these are the shipping methods that would be mentioned if you're looking at it. Now, there are considerations I want to bring up for shipping costs and shipping delivery. The reason that is one, shipping origin will affect your delivery time and cost. If you're doing Amazon FBA, that's a different story. And Walmart also has its fulfillment service. They're rolling it out. Um, if you're doing that, that's a slightly different story. That's technically sending them parcel, large amounts of parcel to their warehouse or their fulfillment centers or their warehouses, and then they send it out in parcel as it's ordered. So shipping origin won't necessarily affect that, and neither will it won't affect the delivery time because like Amazon offers Prime, so they're always going to be shipping with a service that guarantees it gets there within the short amount of time. But if you're selling yourself or selling on your own website, um, the location you're sending from will affect the delivery time. Most of the parcel carriers will have on their website a transit time estimate map. And it might even have a utility function to it where you can put in a zip code for where it's being delivered or where you're shipping from, and then it'll color the map of the continental US, showing you like green is 1 day, yellow is 2 day, orange is 3 day. It'll show you the color on the map so you get an idea of how long a shipment from your location will take to get somewhere on the standard shipping. So if you're not doing 2 day or 3 day or air, it'll let you figure out the time for that. And then destination, this is goes beyond just the delivery time, in that if someone orders for a military base or a location outside the continental US, you will likely end up having to use USPS, simply because the other carriers won't be able to deliver to that location. So some marketplaces actually give you the option of turning off orders, being able to order from those locations. I know a couple of clients I had that um, they don't do Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, or any military base, because it would force them to use USPS, and their products, were large enough that sending it with USPS actually um, cut out any profit, and essentially each sale would be a loss. So they didn't want to run into that situation. So every online site they sold on, they made sure to not allow sale to Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, the territorial islands, or to any military bases, simply because it was going the shipping costs were just not compatible with their products. So know that you have that option to control where you are shipping your products in most retailers. And even if you're building your own website with Shopify or WooCommerce, for example, they'll have settings where you can actually, anyone who's ordering to a certain address or certain zip code, not address, but certain zip code or certain state, you can actually block from them from being able to purchase, because it's not cost effective for you to be shipping your product to that far or to that location. So know that you do have shipping controls within Parcel. LTL and TL are different stories because they're location to destination, and it takes some time, and it's something that's quoted with whatever carrier, LTL or TL carrier, trucking company that you hire. So that's a case by case basis. It's not really the same as Parcel. So in logistics, something that's important in e-commerce is lead time. Lead time refers to the time frame between receiving an order and shipping an order. Um, it's basically how long does it take you to process that order as soon as you receive it. Obviously, most online retailers and marketplaces prefer a faster lead time, and they do have metrics that keep track of your lead time. And the reason they do this is because they want the fastest sellers who send out the products as quickly as possible without delay. Now, there are exceptions if it's a certain type of category. If you're selling custom items, for example, or any kind of item that's large and requires preparation, they'll make exceptions for that because it's sensible, realistic. So in that case, there are exceptions, but in regular items, are always better. So as soon as you receive an order, preparing it to be shipped and sent is important. And 1 to 2 days is the ideal time frame. Some sellers even strive for zero point 0.9 days, which is essentially within just a few hours they're preparing the order and sending it out. Um, so it kind of means like they get the order, say in the morning, before their cutoff time, and then they send it out by noon, and then they send out the rest of any new shipments ordered by afternoon. So that's very aggressive. That requires a lot of setup to be able to make sure you're doing that effectively, but you don't have to hit that kind of level unless you're very aggressively trying to improve that metric and really boost your relationship with whichever online retailer you're going with. Otherwise, 1 to 2 days is ideal. And as long as you keep that metric, you should be fine. If you run into issues where it's going to be delayed, you can contact the retailer, let them know that there's going to be an issue, just so it's ahead of time. In that note, I will say that when you're working in e-commerce, even Amazon, where you don't have an account manager or buyer and there's a support team, um, if you are going to be hitting a certain situation where your metrics are going to be negatively affected, and they're going to be negatively affected because you can't fix whatever the issue is, and sometimes it's not even your fault. It could just be that UPS didn't even show up that day. That can happen. And if that's a situation you're running into, you can always contact that marketplace, that retailer, let them know that this is going to happen, and that way they'll make a note. So if when your metric does get hit and you see like a minus, or it turns red, or it just shows that it's above normal, um, they'll have that note there, and it won't actually negatively affect your relationship too much, because you'll have notified them ahead of time that this issue is going to happen. And as long as it doesn't happen too frequently, you should be fine. So that's something I recommend if you are trying to keep a lead time and you're afraid that you're about to run into the above the normal, above the expectation. Just let them know through a case, through email, call, and then that way they can note it. I recommend something written, so preferably email, because you just want to have that proof. But make sure you have that and send that out, just to make sure that even if you do metric wise hit the negative, they put a note there letting them know that there was a reason for it. And it's usually better to let them know ahead of time than after when it happens, because metrics are important in e-commerce, and that's why lead time is important. Having good metrics that show you are shipping quickly, you are shipping on time, is vital to getting that confidence with the marketplace. Um, this primarily applies to shipping customers, B2B suppliers who are doing LTL and TL, whether you're doing it, sending it to the retailer. Technically, there is a time frame they want, but their time frame is within a ship window. So let's say, I don't know, Amazon Vendor Central says they want 500 units of your items sent to their warehouse in Texas. They're not going to say we want this in 1 to 2 days. They're going to give you a 7-day window starting from whenever they want you to get started, which is usually about 3 to 5 days after when they make the order. And then you just have to make sure you ship within that window. So there isn't that same stress for any kind of business to business supplier relationship with the marketplace, with any online retailer. They'll have their own time scale. But if you're doing parcel or LTL to a specific customer, um, lead time is important. Again, LTL, you'll have a bit more of a margin because preparing LTL takes time. You need to call the LTL carrier, and then the company has to send out a vehicle. It's not the same way where you can set up UPS daily pickups. So there is a lead time. You do have a bit more room there, but it might be a few days more. It won't necessarily be like a ship window though. They'll still want you to send it out as soon as possible. So anything going to a customer as soon as possible, anything going to the retailer as a supplier within whatever time frame they want. So that's the distinction you can make. Um, Packaging is important because packaging affects shipping costs if you are using too much packaging or your packaging is too heavy. But also packaging affects returns. If your packaging is too light and too thin, it will probably get damaged during the shipping process. Because one thing to know is that whenever you send anything parcel, there is a chance that it could get damaged, it can squashed, it could get ripped, tear, broken. It's not a very soft process because they're trying to move through the amount of volume they get as quickly as possible. With as much consideration for maintaining the integrity of your item, but things happen. Someone put something heavy on top of your product and it gets squashed. Those kind of things happen. That's why claims exist with the carriers. But if you can at least make sure your packaging is good enough without making it too expensive, you can reduce your returns and also make your shipping costs controllable. One thing to note is that if you can get your shipping package as close to the size of whatever you are shipping, or you can make whatever you're shipping smaller, whether it's through folding or compacting or any kind of item like that you can manipulate the dimensions of. If you can do that without damaging the item, of course, like certain items you can't fold because if you fold it, it leaves a mark, and that's not good for the customers. Um, if you can shrink either the package down to the size of the item or as close as possible, or you can shrink the item itself and then shrink the package to the size of that item that you shrunk, always good. You don't want to use something way too large for whatever you're shipping because you are going to be paying for that extra size for whatever you are sending. So you want to make sure you're as efficient as possible with packaging. And then I also recommend that packaging should be labeled with as much relevant information. Usually, your company info, the company, the warehouse address, and maybe an email or a phone number. Because one, if you're doing FBA, for example, and if the label gets damaged, they'll be able to contact you to let you to get a new label or update or fix or send the item back. And the same thing with if it's going through UPS or any company like that. Sometimes what happens is your shipping label gets ripped off or damaged, and UPS or FedEx can't deliver it because they don't know where it's supposed to go. If your information was whatever information was on the label, and the box had nothing on it, they're not going to know who to contact. And that's obviously a problem because then that item just gets lost. But if they know who to contact, you could even tell them what the address is, and then they can print the new label out in their warehouse and then make sure the item still gets sent to the customer. So it's always it's good to have a redundancy and having your information, some kind of contact info or business info somewhere on the package of the product you're sending, just so if anything happens to the label itself, there'll still be something else on there for someone to be able to get in touch with you, um, whether it's the carrier because they get damaged, or if it's like Amazon because in FBA the label got torn off and they don't know what the item is, or even the customer who receives it and they throw they rip off the packaging or it comes to them dirty. That's another possibility. Usually after they deliver it, sometimes the package gets dirty or damaged. Sometimes the customer doesn't know to go to their platform and contact you from there. Usually what happens is they contact the platform, and then the platform tells them to contact you. It doesn't happen often, of course, but it's you can't make assumptions with your customers. So having that redundancy, always a plus. Returns, again, as I mentioned, are a reality. Sometimes you'll get customers returning it for reasons that don't make sense. Sometimes they'll make returns because they're saying something even though the descriptions are there. Like I said, you can't make assumptions with your customers. They will, unfortunately, sometimes just not make any sense. And in those cases, it's a matter of customer service. But the logistical component comes down to returns. You want to make sure that at least your logistics are on point, so you don't have returns due to your logistics. If you do get returns due to just the customer's buyer remorse, at least you'll mitigate having any additional returns due to any issues with the logistical aspects of it. And that includes shipping on time. Some customers will use late shipping as a complaint reason. So, as long as you take away as many of those, what I call like legitimate reasons, then you only have to deal with buyer preference issues. And in that case, it's a matter of customer service, how you handle them. And sometimes you just, for the purpose of, maintaining good customer service, sometimes you do have situations where you'll just have to provide that refund and bite the bullet on that deal to just make sure that you're maintaining the reputation of your brand and you are maintaining your reputation as a seller, because the last thing you want is a negative review, because most marketplaces will not remove it in almost any case, and negative reviews will affect the visibility of your product and will affect sales. And as they say, people who have complaints are more likely to leave a feedback than people who are satisfied. So mitigating that, those people are unsatisfied, but if you are able to satisfy them by just closing the situation, and that way they're not compelled to leave a bad review, I would usually consider that a plus. Now we're just rounding up to the last one. I just want to make sure that I wrap this up and give you guys time for questions. So I'm going to go through this a bit quickly, but one thing that's important with supply when you're bringing in products is freshness. What they refer to as freshness is a product's position in the marketplace in regards to its content and appearance to customers, including trends. Basically, it doesn't mean always bringing in a new item. It means updating your item with higher quality content. Usually, it's enough to put in new images or more images. That's usually enough to maintain its freshness. But let's say your content you created about a year ago, and now you're deciding that it has to be, you can do better. You can update it, and you can update the bullet points, the descriptions, title, anything like that, and you can increase its freshness on the marketplace. There isn't necessarily a specific metric to this. Though the metrics that do exist will usually keep track of the content quality. Um, but this one won't necessarily have a metric, but it's just something that if you are working with an account manager, account buyer, this is something that might be come up in the conversation, and it's mostly tied to maintaining with customer trends, because trends will actually affect sales. So if for that year customers decide there's a trend for everyone to start buying gray products in whatever category, anyone who's selling gray or amplifying their gray in their selections will end up getting more sales, just simply because that just became the customer trend for that year. Um, so always maintaining that freshness can at least make sure that you grasp onto any of those sales momentum in the anytime a trend happens. Even best-selling items, there's always some kind of room for improvement. Even if you can't do anything about the content, maybe there's a way to add more content. Maybe you can add videos, maybe you can add more pictures. Anything like that is always an option that you can take a look at. And I usually recommend that you don't make any major changes unless in a situation where maybe your content wasn't high quality enough. Then you can make a major change there, but otherwise you don't really have to make major changes to maintain your freshness. You can always make minor updates. You can put in some new keywords. If there's a certain trend going on, and that trend is relevant to your product and your category, you can go ahead and hook on to that trend momentum by using the right keywords. So when customers are looking at it and they see those right keywords, or the SEO aspect, someone's searching for it and it pops up, that will keep them, grab their attention and increase the likelihood of them actually putting the item in the cart and checking out. Having a reliable source is always vital. Now, when you're getting started, this is a bit hard because you're working with the manufacturer the first time, unless it's a manufacturer someone else has trusted and you are getting connected through them or referred through them. The product yourself, the reason you want a reliable source is, one, you don't want too many fluctuations in pricing. Two, you want to always make sure they ship on time so you don't run into a situation where you're out of stock longer than you should be. And three is consistency in quality, because quality is very important. Customers will notice if they order an item and it's some kind of item that can be ordered again because it gets degraded through use. If they order it again, they will notice a difference. That even if it's a year later, the customer will notice. And I'm sure you yourself have that situation where even if you order something long after your first order, you'll notice something different about it. You will get that feeling. So you want to always maintain consistency, or improve the quality if it's not going to cut into your bottom line too much. But otherwise, maintaining the consistency is important. So having a source that can do all that is important. Any source who starts showing issues where they're sending you defective and delays in the shipping, you will want to start finding someone else. These kind of issues will easily tank your business online, especially because e-commerce is a situation where first impression is your only impression. If you start and suddenly you're slammed by bad reviews because your next restock took too long and then the restock came and it was defective, the way that the algorithms work for ranking is any kind of negative drop, it actually becomes harder to come back up because it will use past data to determine how much weight the positive data has. So negative data will cripple your business on that marketplace. So if you start seeing any red flags, immediately start considering finding a new source, because you do not want to tank your business as a result of that issue. And then you want to identify your suppliers not just by pricing, but whether they'll make a good long-term partner for e-commerce. Now, obviously, where I mentioned, good long term is, they're able to maintain no defects, good quality control, and then always on time shipping, so they're not delaying necessarily. And pricing is important because of the bottom line. But what I mean by e-commerce business is sometimes some people will work with a distributor or a manufacturer who might actually be selling online. You want to take a look at that and make sure and see if they're selling online themselves, because the problem is if they're selling online and you're buying from them, and they're giving you a markup, if they ever decide to start selling wherever you're selling, you will not be able to compete with them. And the last thing you want to do is be their guinea pig to start building traction for their items, only for them to take that business out from under you when they notice that it's actually selling. Um, so this is a matter of due diligence in the supply, but always check and see if that manufacturer or distributor is selling online themselves, because you will not be able to win in a competition with them, and you don't want to be their guinea pig for them to do market research. Basically, if they're selling you the product so you can sell online, and you're kind of serving as their market research experiment, um, you're not going to have a long-term e-commerce operation when they finally decide that they want to sell directly wherever you're selling under whatever item you're selling. It's not good business, but unfortunately those kind of businesses and suppliers do exist. So that's something else you'll want to take into consideration. Now imports, I don't go into too much detail, but most people are importing the products unless they have a manufacturer here, or they're sourcing from here, or they're making items themselves. Um, you'll want to plan ahead of time just to make sure you don't have any delays and any kind of documentation issues. In this case, usually if you're buying in small amounts, usually the parcel carrier will handle the custom stuff. But FedEx and UPS, for example, do offer custom services like import services. So you are able to check in with them. Pricing will depend on the type of products, how often you're getting them. But having that additional guidance can help avoid any situations if you're selling a type of product that you're not 100% sure about in regards to importing. So I just wanted to bring that up as something you should consider, and also make sure you consider the import costs in your pricing. Um, uh, and leave a good margin. Sometimes those tariffs can change. Sometimes the shipping costs in importing can change. Sometimes the raw material prices can change. So if you kind of bake in a bit more of a margin in there, you can help soften the blow of that impact. Because the problem with e-commerce, especially if you're selling through retailers, is on your own website you can raise the prices easily. On the other marketplaces and suppliers, raising prices is tricky. If you're a supplier, you can't even raise the prices without a buyer or the account manager reviewing it and approving it. And with like third-party seller situations, yeah, you can go in and change the price and raise it, but their algorithm will notice the increase in price, and their system will tweak your ranking a bit. Now, these algorithms are proprietary, so no one actually knows the details of it. The formulas are something only the executives of that company actually know about. But through experience with these marketplaces, you do see the trends. And one trend is anybody who raises their price will see a slight potential slowdown in their sales um, for a period of time, and then the negative impact of that recent price change will generally just go away. I usually see it in about 2 weeks time frame. So within 2 weeks, there might be a negative impact, and after the 2 weeks, it'll go away. But that basically means there is a potential that for 2 weeks, your sales will actually slow down versus what it was normally going at, until that system decides that you're not changing your price, so they're going to remove that penalty. um, so it is a potential, so that's why you just want to make sure you're prepared ahead of time so you don't have to raise prices each time something pops up. So we'll jump into the Q&A now. I know I went through quite a bit of information there, but these are vital things to consider when you are looking to do your e-commerce business, and avoid obstacles and expenses, and make sure that your business activities and operations are not affected. Um, Now, in regarding to shipping with the companies, uh, for a scale, um, any scale will technically work. Now, it depends on type of product. If your product is a bit on the heavy side, and you're really trying to get something exact down, by exact I usually mean usually to the hundredth place. After that, it doesn't really matter. Most places round it up to the next hundredth. Um, so up to the hundredth decimal, if you're selling something that's so the way it works is that in the shipping with the weight and dimensions, there's actually certain thresholds where if you pass a certain weight by even just zero point 0.1 pounds, the price will change by a few dollars, or even from a dollar to a few dollars, depending on where you already were. In those kind of situations where you're right in the middle and your product, you're trying to get that exact down, you will want to use a scale that can, be very accurate down to at least the 10th decimal or the hundredth. Obviously, don't blow your budget on a scale that you don't have to do anything that extreme. But if you are in a situation where you're selling an item and it's in a situation where and you can actually check this. So what I recommend is going on FedEx or UPS, start preparing a fake shipment. So put in information about it, like some address. Pick an address in California, since if you're in New Jersey, pick an address in California. Start putting in the info, then put in your size and weight, and then check what the estimate rate is, and then change the pound by 1 or 2 pound up and down, and then see if that rate changes and see how much it changes by. If there's a large change, then you will probably want to get a scale that's a bit more accurate to the at least the 10th decimal, the 10th decimal space. So like if 1.1 and 1.2 make a difference, you will obviously want to make that difference with an accurate scale. Two is, if it doesn't make a difference, then it doesn't really matter. And a second thing to note, is that the parcel carriers will use their own scales, and they usually have industrial scales, which are kind of like platforms, and then just throw the box on it. Um, Now, obviously, they'll use their scale as the number, but the reason I wouldn't say that scales don't matter, in that case, is because the scales do matter. Because if you do have a scale that you are in that precarious situation, if you have that scale that's calibrated to that, you can actually you can actually measure it the weight yourself, and then send that as proof to FedEx or UPS or whatever parcel carrier, and you can actually dispute what they're charging you and what they're weighing. You do have that option. So their decision isn't actually final. Obviously, they prefer their decision, but you can actually dispute that and send in your own evidence. Um, so I wouldn't worry about the scale if it's not near a threshold, or if the item isn't so heavy that it makes it very different in price. But if you are in that precarious area, just look for a scale. Don't break the bank on a scale, but look for a scale that is can get very accurate calibrations, at least maybe the point 0.1 or 0.11, the 10th or the 100th area point. Because if you want to dispute and you can show that you're using a scale that is calibrated to that kind of accuracy, you can easily dispute whatever the parcel carrier is saying, by saying that, look, here's my measurement, I use the scale is certified to be this accurate. And you can try to get them to stop classifying your product at a weight that actually charges you more money, because at the end of the day, they'll usually want to prefer charging you more money. So you need to be able to dispute that with evidence, and your evidence will be a scale certified to whatever accuracy. So that's a consideration take. But like I said, you want to test that out and see if it if it actually affects you. So if you're not near a threshold with your item, it won't really matter. But if you are, it will matter. I think I saw something in the chat. Oh no. Okay, so for product research and sourcing, there isn't. I don't have a webinar for the e-commerce component, but I think maybe Takoa might know as well, but I believe there are other webinars with SBDC about product research and product sourcing for all types of businesses. And I think there's also about private label as well. So the SBDC actually does have webinars covering other business aspects about product research and sourcing. I don't have one specific for e-commerce because there isn't really anything unique about e-commerce that would make it different from regular product research. So you can actually check the webinar schedule, or maybe Takoa might have.
I'll actually post it in the chat right now, our Eventbrite links to all our webinars so that you can look out for that.
Yeah, so there'll be webinars about private label and product research that are applicable to e-commerce businesses as well, and you can participate in those webinars by the SBDC to get information, and then you can use that info for your e-commerce. I don't see any other questions. No. So yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ahmet, for your presentation and for your time. Since we have no more questions, I would like to direct you all to the chat. So I am putting our Eventbrite link as well as our website link on there and some of our upcoming events and webinars that we are hosting. You should see it there right now. So around the bottom of that text is, we have a few webinars coming up. We have a Ask the Experts live virtual open house on March 17th, which is on SBDC Day. So this is a live Q&A that we will have on Zoom where you will be able to ask your questions and get them answered live by our experts. And again, that live open house is on March 17th at 10 a.m. We are also hosting a virtual Women Entrepreneurs Network, the acronym is WEN, Tea and Talk on March 25th. Now, this event allows you to meet role models in business and make contact with professional career women who are power brokers in their private or public professional sectors, as well as network with some other women of like minds with the same aspirations for success through entrepreneurship. So if that's something that you're interested in, feel free to register for that. And that event is that event is actually the last event listed in the chat. So I only listed about 5 or 6 of these events, but we are holding many more on our Eventbrite page as well as our website. So feel free to look at that. And that is the first link in the chat that I just posted. Okay, so I also want to remind you that you all will be receiving a video replay as well as the presentation slides within 24 to 48 business hours. So you will get that in a few days. After the webinar in the browser, you will see a survey pop up. I would really appreciate it if you can just take a few minutes to complete that survey. That survey will help us to adjust our presentations in the future, as well as give us some information on the kind of assistance you may be needing for your business. So if you have time to complete that, your feedback is much appreciated. Again, our email, our phone number, and our website is listed on the screen right now. So if you are looking to speak one-on-one with Ahmed, or if you are seeking any other business assistance, feel free to contact us or visit our website there. And on that note, we will now end this webinar. I want to thank you all for taking the time to attend today. Thank you for your questions, for participating. Thank you, Ahmed. And we look forward to seeing you all at our future webinars. Have a great day, everyone.